This heavy tank is a good example of what happens when past and present collides. Tank combines properties of old, time-tested features like sloped armor plates or usual for Soviet tanks huge post-penetration damage, and at the same time it has many upgrades that are common in modern tank designs. That is not surprising. T-10M is the last heavy tank in Soviet tech tree. Anything that goes after that are MBTs. That gives us a vehicle which has an unusual blend of characteristics. Belongingness to different time periods is very well represented by the range of ammunition types available to this tank. The default shell is old good Soviet APHE. High caliber round usually one-shots all tanks it can penetrate, and that's a common option for a lot of older tanks. Though at this battle rating vehicles are focusing on penetration. Almost everyone you will meet in battles will use either APFSDS or heat projectiles. Both of them create narrow cone of fragments flying one direction, compared to APHE that, in addition to same fragments, explodes inside opponent's tank, damaging everything around it, easily reaching even those crew members and modules that were not on shell's path and are further away from the impact point. So when using this shell that is familiar from lower tiers, you can expect to have significant post-penetration damage advantage over everyone using modern ammunition. Thanks to being one step into modern era, tank can use heat FS and APDS shells to reach similar penetrations as your opponents. Though, do you really need to sacrifice damage for penetration? The idea of APHE may be old, but T-10M with exactly the same gun's caliber as IS-2 in mid-tiers can reach significantly better penetrations. Shell can go through nearly 300 mm of armor at close range. If projectile cannot be stopped by mouse turret when attacked frontally, probably you will rarely run into penetration issues, especially considering that vast majority of opponents will be light tanks. Tank has another feature familiar to everyone who played Soviet heavy tanks: long reload. Despite it's the fastest reloading 122mm gun out of all Soviet heavy tanks, it still takes 15.4 seconds, which is about twice slower than most of your opponents. Keeping that in mind, using modern ammunition becomes clearly worse option. You would reach similar penetration and damage as everyone else, but because of reload time will still be a disadvantage. So unless you use APHE shells, you won't have any advantages in firepower. Though you don't always have to shoot the main gun in the first place. T-10M is equipped with two unusually large caliber machine guns. One of them is coaxial, while another on top of the turret can rotate freely. 14.5mm bullets allows you to have more penetration. It can reach even over 40mm at very close ranges, which is enough for light tanks or SPAAs. And sometimes even side armor of Leopards can be penetrated. Probably these machine guns can also deal more damage to planes, but considering how gameplay changes when you mainly face fast jets or helicopters with long-range ATGMs, ground vehicles will be the main targets for your secondary weapons. Another modern feature fixed a very well-known problem in Soviet heavy tanks line. Hull wobbling when shooting on the move was one of the main reasons of missing a shot, which considering a long reload can often lead to tank's destruction, or if you waited for tank's full stop to shoot, you gave opponents more time to fire at you, which again leads to sad consequences. Two-plane gun stabilizer, which is usual at these tiers, means you can finally confidently fire on the move as soon as you notice opponent. It is the first and last heavy tank in Soviet tech tree to have such luxury. But there is one more thing that never changes across all Soviet tanks, and by the time of researching this vehicle you should already be familiar with it. Guns depression, only -4 degrees. It will limit your options on maps with a lot of hills. While turret's rotation is quite slow, 17 degrees per second, that is enough for comfortable gameplay and you shouldn't get in trouble very often because of it. But you will get in trouble because of this heavy tank's armor. Front of the hull is made of 120mm plates. All of them have very good slopes. Such angles would do amazing job at lower tiers, though at battle rating of this vehicle it's almost irrelevant. Both most common shell types here, APFSDS and Heat, are not suffering so much from denormalization, so they are more effective at penetrating sloped armor than earlier projectiles. Additionally, they have higher angles of ricochet, so sloped armor is less likely to deflect these shells. Turret is opposite. Its slopes are not so good, but armor is way thicker. Towards the gun, armor can reach up to 250mm. Additionally, there is 100mm thick overlapping gun mantlet. That will result in 350mm of armor in the thickest place, which again, considering penetrations of modern ammunition, is not enough to feel protected. Nevertheless, armor will protect you sometimes, especially when fighting lower BR vehicles. So I'm not saying that it's useless, it's just not as effective as you could expect from a heavy tank. Another thing you don't expect from heavy tanks is being fast. And it's okay, because T-10M is not fast. But on the other hand, you cannot call it a slow vehicle as well. It easily accelerates over 30 and then slowly up to 40 kph. The maximum speed of 50 can be reached only when descending. This maximum speed also makes it the fastest Soviet heavy tank in the game. Maybe you cannot compete with most of your opponents, but speed is enough for comfortable relocation around the map. Reverse of 9 kph is not fast, but should also be enough in most situations when you need to hide after the shot for reload, or to take advantage of your smoke screen, as it is not so simple to use. Both engine smoke screen and smoke grenades are deployed behind the vehicle, so either opponents must be behind you or your engine should be intact to hide after deployment. So it's tricky to use and not always helpful. But it still can be used in many situations, just sometimes it requires some creativity to be deployed effectively. On a good note, you won't need to conserve smoke screens, as you can activate them twice for each type, 4 times in total. In arcade, post-penetration damage of APHE shells are even more important, since it's harder to destroy opponents here. Instead of tank's destruction, crew replenishment automatically activates, so usually it will require multiple shots for everyone using heat or APFSDS shells, while you can be pretty sure that any penetration will turn into one shot. But on the other hand, lower penetration of your APHE shell will be felt more often, as opponents are always turned towards you, and overall, heavier tanks are more popular in arcade. Nevertheless, T-10M felt more effective in arcade. With the help of penetration indicator, you will always find a way even through armor of well-protected opponent. In general, almost all vehicles T-10M can face focuses on having good penetration, and expects opponents to do that as well, so armor becomes less relevant and they sacrifice it for mobility. What they don't expect is to see an opponent that will benefit from reduced armor and will use less penetrating shells but dealing way more damage, though it is the only advantage T-10M has. I would rate this tank 5 damaging effects out of 10. It has collection of old and modern vehicles features, so some of the modern features are not implemented yet and some older ones already irrelevant.